This is part B of the lecture for History 226 on pre-Islamic Arabia on the eve of the rise of Islam. I had mentioned some of the religious concepts that had been present in Arabia during this period before Muhammad. There was, on some people's part, an embracing of a god they referred to as Allah, or the God. To some of them it may have been something of a vague concept. It appears to have been to them to some of them the highest form of the divine. Perhaps they saw him as the head of the Meccan pantheon of gods. This name was known throughout Syria and northern Arabia, and this concept of Allah was of importance in Mecca. The Kaaba may have been seen as his home. Some of these people who embraced belief in Allah could be said to be embracing something called henotheism. And this is belief in or worship of one God without denying the existence of others, or to put it another way, while accepting the existence of other gods. And it appears that many of the people who embraced Allah were in this position. And in fact, even later, with Muhammad, briefly he seems to have embraced the possibility of henotheism in the so-called Satanic Verses incident, which I will deal with later and you will read about later. But at any rate, one could argue that there was a tendency toward monotheism. Some Muslim sources looking back on this time say that there were individuals called Hanifs, people who believed in one God, who were not Christians and who were not Jews. There were, however, Christians and Jews in the Arabian Peninsula. Not a tremendous number of Christians. There were a larger number of Jews, and it seems logical to expect that this had some impact, and we see some demonstrable impact on Islam in its early years from this. The Roman Catholic Church was unable to enforce orthodoxy on Christians in Arabia. They spoke of it as the breeding ground of heresies. So many of the Christians who were there were not followers of, say, the Catholic Church or the Eastern Church. There had not been really a great split between them yet, but they were following some varieties of Christianity, in some cases that had been disallowed by the church. For example, there were the people known as the Lachmids, who were found in this area bordering the Persian Empire. They, by the 500s, had embraced Nestorian Christianity, or at least some of them had, but that was a variety of Christianity that was seen as a heresy by the Western Church. Also, the Ghazanids, who lived in this area, which is presently part of Jordan, they were Monophysite Christians. And again, I will talk about those, if I have not already, in the lecture on the world context of Arabia in the years before Islam. So there were Christians in various parts of Arabia. There was a Christian power here, Aksum, in what is now Ethiopia. Your reading some of it may refer to it as Abyssinia, but that had been Christianized. And it had occasionally sent troops into southwestern Arabia and had tried to protect Christian communities there. There was a rather sizable Christian community at Najran, and here is a map which has Najran labeled. So there was Christianity in the Arabian Peninsula, and in fact, in Mecca there were a few Christians, though not a lot. One of them, however, was important in that, at least one of the people who some of the sources indicate was a Christian, was a first cousin of Khadija, Khadija, the first wife of Muhammad. This cousin did apparently have some impact on Muhammad, but this community at Najran faced extermination by the kingdom of Himyar. The kingdom of Himyar down in southwestern Arabian Peninsula in the 520s basically exterminated the Christians. The kingdom of Himyar much of the time was led by a Jewish monarchy. One leader of Himyar in the 520s carried out a pogrom against the Christians at Najran, and it included the massacre of several thousand of them. They were put together in a church, and the church was burned down with them in it. So there were Christians here and there in the Arabian Peninsula, but there were many more Jews. The kingdom of Himyar was a Jewish kingdom for the most part, at least for a period from the 300s through well into the 500s. Also, at a town called Yathrib, Yathrib, which eventually had its name changed to Medina, and that is often spelled Medina. That had three sizable Jewish clans in it, and in your reading of a biography of Muhammad, you will bump into events dealing with them. So monotheism was certainly present in the Arabian Peninsula, and probably had been there for a long time. There are tales of some of the apostles going to the Arabian Peninsula and doing mission work there. So monotheism was present. You do find in some caves inscriptions as early as the 400s, maybe a little earlier, speaking of the merciful, Ramadan. And that is taken to be by many a reference to one God. So this is some of the background for the emergence of Islam, and we will get to that in just a bit, but this is the end of this lecture.